Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Slice of Mentorship podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have with me the luminary in the fields of biotech and economic development, Dr. Michael Chambers. As an entrepreneur, Dr. Chambers has founded several companies in the biotech industry and has graced numerous corporate boards. His entrepreneurial fervor led him to establish Gulf Coast Angel Network, and he was rightfully honored as Alabama Startup Executive of the Year in 2014. But it doesn't end there. Dr. Chambers is also a staunch advocate for education and economic development. Serving as the Associate Vice President for Research at the University of South Alabama, he has been instrumental in securing federal grants and launching innovative programs such as I-Corps and RAMP, which have greatly benefited scientists, students, and local startups. Join me as I delve into Dr. Chambers' inspiring journey, unpack his insights on entrepreneurship, education, and economic growth. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast. So my first question is, what do you get paid to do at the university?
Well, so I've been here about 7, maybe going on 8 years. My technical title is Associate Vice President of Research and Economic Development. And I was kind of a specialty hire, I think, because I didn't grow up in the university system. I had a lot of private background experience, private sector experience. And so because of working on a number of startups and being very involved in economic development, I was a former chamber of the board of directors of our chamber, which is the largest in the state of Alabama and the oldest, and has been highly successful with Airbus and other people coming to our area. They kind of pulled me in. And so I do a mix of research, as you might imagine, and economic development. On the research side, it's more innovation and entrepreneurship focused. And the economic development side is kind of the flip side of that, working with local industry, either on grant opportunities or on workforce development, any issue that might help build the local economy. And so going back to the other side of the coin, getting our students ready through fast commercialization courses like a program like I-Corps, which you may be familiar with, and then a number of grant opportunities where our faculty need to incorporate some specialized learning in entrepreneurship or innovation. And so I've been pulled into a number of situations like that where I add that component to their grant proposal. Because that's we live in an age where the National Science Foundation, for example, gives away about $7 billion every year. But they've been hyper-focused on translational research, not just basic research, but actually working on things that will make it from the clinic to the bedside, from the lab, to a societal benefit, as they say, that impacts the lives of the people. So it's I'm lucky because I don't do the same thing every single day. It changes almost every day. There's some big themes, but it's been a very interesting job, and I kind of like it like that.
It does seem like a lot of different pieces. So what aspects of your role are you most passionate about?
Wow, I'm not sure I know where to start there. I'm pretty passionate about all of it. I think the thing I enjoy the most is the contact with the students in the I-Corps program, because as I hesitate to say I'm a university administrator, but I guess after 8 years, I probably am. But having contact with students and faculty on a one-to-one basis, that I think is what I enjoy the most, because I can either have it with the students have an impact on how they see things, the technology or their idea, and basically reveal to them how the real world works in terms of adopting products or regulatory frameworks. And then on the faculty side, working with brilliant scientists and faculty members who have done really, really good research. But from my life science experience, it's a long haul from, the research through the regulatory hurdles, through the patent hurdles and the expense involved in both. And so I enjoy that because I feel like I'm really making an impact, and I'm grateful because of my experience that people trust me. And the other thing based on that experience is I'm pretty confident that I don't know a lot of things in many cases. And so I've learned to ask a lot of questions, and that's been very helpful because many times just asking questions, you see obstacles in the road that you hadn't seen before, and you can navigate those much better once you get out, ask questions, do a little customer discovery, or get some expert advice in some areas. So based on my experience, I know I'm not an expert in a lot of areas. So I am wise enough or have enough scar tissue at this point to realize that other people are necessary.
It's fascinating that you are able to spend quite a bit of time with students and faculty. So in terms of your week, how much time do you actually have for this thing that you enjoy the most?
Well, that's a good point, and that is what I would like to have more time. So when the students are in school, the fall and the spring, I will teach a course Monday afternoons. And so we're putting on that course Monday afternoons, and we have office hours. But we have, for that particular course, we have 12 different people from the business school, former Wall Streeters, leads from our incubator here locally helping teach. And so we may have, 10 teams, 30 to 40 students, but we have, 10 to 12 faculty members sharing that load. But we rotate. So I get to have office hours with each, a lot of the different teams along the way. So I can't quantify how much time it is. I wish it were more, but there's other stuff that has to be done.
So essentially, students can sign up for the course, and this is how they can tap your wisdom.
Right. And so we offer it. It's a great question. It's offered for credit, but it's also offered not for credit. And most of the students that take the course take it not for credit, which is, it's a real chore to get a course through a university system that's recognized by multiple departments. It has to go through committees, and I won't get into that. But I think that plays a big role in why the people take it for non-credit. We have like 4 schools involved in this effort. The University of South Alabama is the lead. Bishop State, a local community college, is also involved. Spring Hill College, which dates from, I think, 1821. It's a Jesuit school, is involved. And then the University of Mobile, which is a Baptist institution, is also involved. So we pull students from all of those places if they're interested. And actually, I think we're about to get approval to pull in another HBCU into the fold. So we're trying to involve as many people as we possibly can. The logistics, during COVID, that was a real wake-up call because we all had to go remote. But we're now hybrid. We have a kind of a kickoff in person and a graduation in person. But the rest of the time, because we have people coming, who would have to come from so many different places, we do it remotely with, wings or cohorts in different sections of the Zoom call. So I really rely on a lot of the people here to make that happen from a logistics point of view, and they do a wonderful job.
So it sounds a little bit less than just a course and more like a whole program that you're running.
Well, it is. I guess it is a program because, well, good point. I guess a course is one professor and, the students in front of you and desk. This is a program, as you suggested, where we've reached out into all the colleges and departments, pulled people in from the faculty point of view to help deliver the content. And then we have people from multiple schools coming in to participate. And in this particular program, teams are given up to $5,000 to develop prototypes or to travel. And we encourage them to travel because one of the requirements is that they have 20 documented interviews from folks in the private sector that answer questions concerning the technology that they're trying to develop. They don't ask specifically about their technology because we teach them not to do that, but we teach them to ask really good open-ended questions about the technology that company A is developing. What are your headaches? What keeps you up at night? What do you wish you had that's not available? And kind of maneuver into the area of interest of the students and faculty. And that's the way they really get good information.
And faculty members, the way you interact with them is through the same course or program?
It is. And one of the interesting things is that if you're a faculty member and you apply for a grant with NSF, for example, your chances of getting that grant are about 17 or 18%. Mm-hmm. So roughly not quite 1 out of 5. If you participate in I-Corps and you learn things about customer discovery, customer segments, value proposition, and go through the program, learn a bit about what we call business model canvas, and you then apply for a grant, the national statistics, and this comes from NSF, take you from that 17 to 18% success rate up to around 66 or 67%. So you more than triple your odds of getting a grant if you go through the program, simply because you now know how to write your proposal. You can address, who the customer segment for this technology is, what is the value proposition for each customer segment. And the people at NSF, I-Corps is their program, they're spending their money to teach people this. So when they see that from someone trying to get federal funds, they think, I assume, the odds of that person being able to create a translational product with the technology are much higher than they would be otherwise.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing those statistics. I love numbers like that. I can't help but ask you about, like, you've talked about things you enjoy the most. What are the things that you would like to do less of as a person at the senior level at the university or academic institution?
Paperwork, forms. If anyone has been outside of university and then comes into university, the learning curve begins with acronyms. People are using acronyms that you've never heard of. Then there are forms that you have to complete for everything. And there's software that's particular to the university that are critical to the use of those forms, whether it be for the amount of time you're spending on a certain task or reimbursement of certain expenses. And so it's a good system because it's designed to protect taxpayer money. But if you're not used to it, then it's a little bit of a bear. You have to get used to it. So I'm just never fond of, those types of things. And I don't have to do that much of it. But when I first started here, that was a steep learning curve. And I, unfortunately, mostly unbeknownst to me, violated a number of rules. So,
okay. I hope you didn't get into trouble with that.
Most were not intentional, I hasten to add, but anyway, but it's been a good experience. I learned a lot, and based on my background, I like to do a lot of different things. And this certainly has been a job that's allowed me to do a lot of different things. We have a brand new president, Joe Bonner, who was our former congressman, who's doing an excellent job. And between President Bonner and Vice President Lynn Chronister, who I work with here in my office, I've been given an opportunity to do a lot of different things. So I'm very thankful.
You referred a few times to your background, and I know you have background in commercial law, arbitration, mediation. You worked in a biotech startup. So could you talk a little bit how those experiences shaped your approach to working with entrepreneurs and startups?
Just someone trying to keep a job, going from. No, I started life as a lawyer. I thought that's what I wanted to do, and I did it for better part of 20 years, but I'd always loved business. My first business was in college. I had a couple of hundred small refrigerators that I leased to students at the University of Alabama. Then in law school, we were leaving our old law school, we'd had a former Supreme Court justice attend school there, and it was old and historic, moving to a new one, which was great. But it occurred to me that we could hire an artist to paint a paint the old law school, get the law school list of alumni, and sell that to the alums, which is what I did my third year of law school. And that worked out really well. And then I practiced law. That was probably the most, I don't know, maybe non-entrepreneurial isn't the right word, but it was more defined, so to speak. And I did that for a long time. I did everything from represent Lloyd's of London in maritime cases to representing General Motors and product liability. But because I'd spent some time in Europe, going to school there, I started hearing more and more about arbitration. So I started thinking that, people just can't afford lawsuits. They're just insanely expensive, and business was opting more towards arbitration. So at a relatively young age, I started getting very interested in arbitration. And of course, I had a background in litigation and commercial law. And I volunteered, did some programming with the American Arbitration Association. And then ultimately, I still arbitrate a case here and there for folks and mediate a case here and there. But they hire me from time to time to teach arbitration to people who want to be arbitrators in the United States. And I've helped develop curricula for those programs with the AAA. So that's kind of how that started. But because I had a brother-in-law who was a very talented retinal surgeon. At the time, he was at Johns Hopkins, and he knew I loved business. And ophthalmology is kind of an area of interest for me because when I was a kid, I had a condition called amblyopia, which is people know as lazy eye disease. And so my left eye, for whatever reason, does not speak to my brain really. So it doesn't, people say, don't you want two contacts? And I say, I only need one. And they say, why? And I say, because my eye won't use the other one. And so what it means is I have about 20/40. It's legally blind in my left eye. I can see dull images. But the concept of losing sight was something that was, rang true with me. So when I started talking to my brother-in-law, he had some technology that he had invented at Hopkins and interested me in whether I was willing to take it on. And so he and I started a company called Interex over a kitchen table years ago. And the technology first started as a drug, and what we would call a PTK inhibitor, to try to help back of the eye diseases, things like age-related macular degeneration or diabetic retinopathy, two real problems for either aging Americans or people that have had diabetes for a significant amount of their lives. So we then worked on that for a number of years, and then we pivoted because the whole market changed from taking a pill to try to solve an eye problem to site-specific drug delivery. I used to tell people, if you're trying to deliver a therapeutic dose to the back of the eye, it's like watering a football field to try to get a few drops on a 50-cent piece on the 50-yard line. So site-specific drug delivery made a lot of difference, and we came up with a helical coil that could be implanted into the back of the eye and deliver a therapeutic dose. And so we sold that company. We had an investment from a Minneapolis company, and then they were NASDAQ listed. And I negotiated the sale of the company in 2005. And so that I left the law. There was a period of time when I was trying to do both, and that was very difficult on me and my home life. So I finally just jumped entirely into the life sciences. So that's kind of how I left the law, so to speak, and then moved into life sciences.
And I wanted to ask about the size of the company. At its peak, how many employees did you have?
We probably, in terms of, if you're a startup in the life sciences, you're usually pretty lean. And we measure things in terms of FTEs, full-time equivalents, because you're pulling, the best and the brightest from different places. And at the point we sold the company, we had that year somewhere in between 5 and 10 FTEs total. But it was an amazing experience. It was having the classical pivot was involved, from one technology to another to satisfy the market.
And thank you for sharing. How did you get enticed into the University of South Alabama?
I think it was 2014. I was serving as chairman of the board of the Mobile Chamber, which I'd mentioned earlier. And I started working a lot with Lynn Chronister, who was the vice president of research here. And I can't remember all the things we were working on, but one of them was what's called an IMCP designation from the U.S. Department of Commerce, an industrial manufacturing community. And through the impetus of one of our commissioners, who was a visionary, Merceria Ludgood, she brought this to our attention, and Lynn Chronister put together a team to try to file and get that designation for Mobile, which we eventually got. And I was serving as chairman of the board. I got to know Lynn. And as I recall, actually, I was so impressed with her. I told the people of the chamber I wanted to give her an award, and they said, "We don't have one." I said, "Well, let's create one." So we did, and gave it to her in appreciation for her doing that, because once we were one of the first 8 to 10 communities in the United States to receive that designation. And it was a credit to all the, of course, the people that were working on it, particularly Lynn and others, not me. But it also entitled us to preferential funding for about $2 billion in federal funds, some of which we got that helped launch an accelerator incubator here in our town, among others. So that's how I got involved with the university. And not too long after that, I had another company that was trying to develop a diagnostic for ovarian cancer. The problem with ovarian cancer is 90% of the women who are diagnosed in stage 3 or stage 4 because there are no symptoms. I mean, it's called the silent killer. So we were trying to, if you're diagnosed in stage 1, just because you're lucky, the survival rate is like 98%. So we were trying to develop something like a pap smear, but for ovarian cancer. But we had a real problem getting consistent data. I mean, no data, no business. So they asked me, would you like to come to work for us? And they told me about the job. I went home and talked to my wife, and she looked at me, and she was, I think, a circuit judge at the time. She's since retired, but she said, "Michael, it seems to me they want to pay you to do the things that you're doing now for free." And I said, "Well, there may be some element of truth to that." And it was a really nice offer. And I said, I haven't done anything like that since I taught freshman English at the University of South Alabama as a grad student. So why not? So I kind of moved from the ovarian diagnostic over to the university. And I really did it because I'd been very lucky and very blessed. A lot of, my wife says I'm the luckiest person alive, and I think there's an element of truth to that. I've just always had some really nice opportunities open up, and the opportunity to work with some really nice people. And that's what happened here. So I haven't regretted that move at all. It's been a very interesting experience.
So in terms of that research, are you able to combine like your resources and resources of the university to continue?
Continue the work on my company?
Yes.
Well, we would call that a conflict of interest.
Oh, okay. I thought it would be like a partnership, a private academic partnership.
Yeah, no. Well, we can do those, but they're very tightly controlled. And so given my position here, I couldn't spend any of my time on that. It's just a conflict of interest. It's a little different if you're a faculty member. Most departments, colleges, and schools, for their faculty members, they have 1 day a week that they can use as consulting time or spend on startups. It's a little tougher on people who are classified as administrators. But I stay involved in the life sciences through investments with different folks. And then I serve on a couple of boards. Let's see. Well, it's down to one now, which is a company out of Huntsville, Alabama called Gene Capture, they're doing really, really great work. It's a rapid diagnostic. It has nothing to do with Elizabeth Holmes or Theranos.
Okay.
Even though it is led by Peggy Salmon, who is just a fabulous entrepreneur in her own right. But so I still stay involved. And then I do a lot of work with BioAlabama, which is a statewide organization for the life sciences, and then a group called Innovate Alabama, where we are, it's not just life sciences, but a lot of technology-based companies that we would like to bring to the state. So I do have the opportunity to stay involved. It's just not my company.
Sure, that makes sense, and I understand totally the conflict of interest situation.
No, I'm just teasing you a little bit there, but it's conflict, but I'm just a little bit giving you a hard time. So,
okay. I wanted to follow up on programs, because we talked about the course/program that you have. I also read you have this program you started with Dean Parker, Entrepreneurial Training and Mentorship Program 1702, and then this MIT VMS program. So how many programs are you involved with, and how do they all fit together into the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Well, 1702 started really as an effort. It was kind of phase one, if you will, because most of the entrepreneurship assets that we have didn't exist 10 years ago. They just weren't there. And I think that's probably true in a lot of communities. This whole wave of interest in entrepreneurship is, for many of us, has been a recent phenomenon. But at that time, we used 1702, and the name comes from the date that the city of Mobile was founded. If someone is, so we've been around a long time. It was an effort to kind of galvanize the people who are interested in this topic into a network. And so we've moved beyond that a bit to another program that you mentioned, which we call RAMP, the Real Advice Mentoring Program, which we licensed from MIT. MIT has been doing this for a number of years, but the city, county, Chamber of Commerce put together some money for a number of us to go to MIT to be trained. And so we started that program about 5 years ago. We were, I think, the first program along the Gulf Coast and the first program in the state of Alabama to license the MIT program. And we have today probably 25 experienced mentors and somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 young companies. And we assign teams of mentors to meet with the companies. They are about as diverse as you can imagine. And we try to assign mentors based on their actual need, and we move people around from time to time. But the ecosystem has flourished here. We now have 2 incubators. We have a number of co-working spaces. We have the mentorship program that I just described. The Chamber is very involved in networking opportunities now. We got a grant thanks to our Secretary of Commerce, Greg Canfield, and his staff to hire a business navigator. And the purpose of that business navigator was to focus on minority businesses. Years ago, again, our Commissioner Ludgood sent me an email, and it was an article by our Pulitzer Prize-winning author, John Archibald. He's a journalist here in Alabama. He said that nothing will get solved in the state until we change this. And what he was talking about is that though the state has 27 to 28% African Americans in the state, only 3% of businesses were owned by African Americans in the state. And so we set about at that time to get some grant money to create a minority business acceleration program, which eventually developed another program as well called Minority Business Development, which was before the business. You're thinking about it, you want to go into business. And that's been run for the last number of years by Dr. Don Mosley and Dr. Thomas Nelson in our Mitchell College of Business here at the university. So those are examples of programs, and that business navigator was very important to us because she was hired, Barbara Peters, and she's done a fabulous job of getting out into the Black community and finding people who are interested in starting a business or who have one who don't know about the resources that are available. Because one of the things we've noticed is we've got a lot of great things going on, but if people don't know about it, it's a problem. So we're trying to change that statistic in the state of Alabama to be more representative of what our population has and to be receptive and responsive to the needs of the Black community as well as the community at large.
I love that you talked about success stories that might not be widely known. So could you talk a little bit about the impact of these programs and what have you been able to accomplish? You mentioned a 10-year journey, and what's the next milepost?
Overall, or a particular program, or, I mean,
I'm interested in particular about the programs that you had direct involvement in.
I'll give you a couple examples. Some examples that stand out to me. There was a young student, I think he was from Nigeria, as a matter of fact. I think his name was Frederick Chucks, and he was in our I-Corps program, and he was working with our engineering faculty to build a satellite, which actually eventually, I'm not sure if it was his year or a later year, was actually launched. So he went through the I-Corps program and did well. And so then he's, like all of us, trying to get a job. And I can't remember, I think it was with Lockheed, but one of the things that we do here is you go through the I-Corps program, you graduate, and I give you an innovation certificate. That's one of the things that I realized that I could do, is give them something that they could put on their resume other than just, graduated BA, BS, whatever, that they could put I-Corps Innovation Scholar. And so he had that on his CV. And so he went to the interview session with, I believe, Lockheed. And he told me later, he said, it's the only thing they wanted to know about. He said, they asked me, what does that mean? What is I-Corps? And he said, so I took him through the whole program. He said, that's the only thing we talked about. And so in I-Corps, you have to work on a team. You have to develop the technology. You have to see if it has legs. So it was all the things that really you need when you're trying to hire someone. It would be nice if they knew that stuff on the front end. Long story short, he got the job. So to me, that was a great example of something we accomplished. In the RAMP program, we've had a couple of new companies come in, and many of them are female-led, and they're doing just a fabulous job. But we had one example, and I can't give you names here, but a company who lost its CEO, the husband died, died, and the wife all of a sudden, who was not running the business, owned the business. And I knew her, and she got involved into the RAMP program. We assigned a team to her, and the whole team went to her company, to the place, establishment, met her, met some of her key players. And because she was new, the bank that she had then was really not going to renew her loan, her line of credit to run the business. So we pulled in from another mentor from another team who's worked for a lot of different banks, assigned him to the team, and he had her 2 meetings with different banks within 10 days, and one of them renewed her loan. And the part of the story I love best is that apparently, there's always one guy in a plant that's kind of the foreman, leader of the pack, that's not maybe the owner, came to her and said, we had doubts whether you could pull this off, but when you brought in that team of other folks and they started asking the questions, we knew you could do it. And so to me, those are great stories.
I agree 100%. I love that story. And it kind of shows how deeply you know your mentors and your companies and kind of staying on top of things. Could you talk a little bit about logistics, like how much effort does it take to run a program like that and to stay on top of every little update or major updates?
I don't want to mislead your listeners, because I don't know that I stay on top of every little detail, because I'm pretty confident that we don't. You said, what would I like to do more of? I wish I had more time to reach out on a more regular basis to every single company in our cohort, just to check on them, even though I'm not on their mentoring team, just as one of the people involved in running the program. That would be nice. The logistics for a program that is team-based mentoring are considerable. We license, actually, this may be a shameless attempt on your part, Igor, for me to talk about how great your software is. So I'm teasing, but for your listeners, when we first got involved in this MIT program, it was frustrating because the scheduling is really tough. I mean, you're trying to get 4 mentors to agree to the same time, maybe as 2 business owners, getting the venue set and responses, and you're trying to keep track of all the agendas for every meeting to have some institutional memory. And I remember 5 or 6 years ago, I told Angela, who helps run this program, I said, Angela, we should just create a software and do it upright and then sell it to everybody, because we're not alone. There are other people out there to need this, because we know they're complaining as well. It's very difficult. But because of all this other stuff that was going on, I didn't do it. And I'm glad I didn't, because the person interviewing me right now came to the same conclusion and did it. And I'm sure did it far better than I could have done it anyway. And so we solved the problem with logistics by actually leasing your software. And we're very delighted that you did that and that it's available to programs like us, because it's really been very helpful. So yes, there are logistical problems, but all kidding aside, thanks to your efforts, we were able to solve a big portion of our frustration. I hope you're not embarrassed of me giving you that story, but it's heartfelt.
Thank you. And I do appreciate it. I do need to improve my marketing efforts. Having conversations with people like you is definitely going to help. So thank you for sharing.
I mean, that short blurb will not cost you very much, Igor. Trust me, we can come to a satisfactory solution. So
agreed. In terms of people who are on an earlier stage in their journey and they're trying to build or upgrade their entrepreneurial environment or create a better space for their local entrepreneurs, do you have any advice for those people?
Well, there are a number of good books out there. The one that I seem to recall is, I have it on my shelf here somewhere. I think it's called Startup Communities by Brad Feld. That's a pretty good one. And I hope I don't get in trouble for slander or libel or whatever, but I remember one of the things from the book that I died laughing when I read it is he says, sometimes your community just has to have a couple of good funerals. And we haven't had that problem, but I can imagine that it could exist. The most critical item in any community for almost any topic, but particularly this one, developing a great entrepreneurial ecosystem, is good collaborative leadership. And you can have good leadership sometimes, but it's not necessarily collaborative, because here in our city, we're surrounded by a lot of other smaller communities and cities. White population, Black population. We are on the east side. We're on the west side of Mobile Bay. Baldwin County is on the east side of Mobile Bay, and it's a completely different demographic. But if you took those two counties and put them together, the territory is just a little smaller than Delaware and Rhode Island put together, just to give you an order of magnitude. And in between them is Mobile Bay, which is a considerable body of water. So we have been blessed. We have a lot of layers of leadership in those two counties, but for the past couple of decades, we've been very successful in collaborating, and it's produced great economic results. It's produced great results for the development of our ecosystem. 25 years ago, we had 2 chemical companies. Now we have 27. 15 years ago, we didn't make airplanes. Now we're with Airbus and Bombardier. We're the 4th largest manufacturer of commercial aircraft in the world. 15 years ago, we didn't produce steel or aluminum. Within those 15 years, we have what's known as AM&S. It's a premier state-of-the-art steel facility in the northern part of the county. We have the first aluminum recycling facility that's been built in the United States in 40 years, and a brand new hydrogen facility in the county above us, which will fuel a lot of the chemical companies located nearby. The container terminal that we have here with the Port of Mobile, which is the 10th largest in the United States, the container terminal is the fastest growing container terminal in the United States, 5 years running. So things like that don't happen because companies don't come to communities that don't have strong collaborative leadership. So I give a lot of credit to to our elected officials for being able to play well with others and represent this area well. So I would tell anyone, if you want to invest and develop a great ecosystem, start with great leaders, making sure you've got them, and if not, get them elected, and then work with them to make it happen.
And do the leaders work across the aisle?
Well, most of the time, I will say we are known, and I've heard many people in other parts of the state say the great thing about Mobile is you can make one phone call and get everybody you need to talk to in a room together. That apparently doesn't happen everywhere because there's some territoriality. It's not to say that we get along all the time. I mean, some of this is politics, but when it comes down to getting companies to come here, providing jobs, I'd say we do a really good job of working together to do that. So, I mean, we're in the fortunate situation now in this area. We need somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 employees in the next 24 months. And I'm talking about people who are qualified and can obviously pass a drug test. And that's a great challenge, but it's one that when Airbus first decided to come here, there were people in Seattle, and I won't mention the name of the company that's there, but that didn't think that we could do it. But we did it, and we're going to try to do it again.
Very cool. Thank you so much, and congratulations. This is an amazing success story for sure, and I very much appreciate your time.
Well, you're very kind to interview me, and I appreciate it. And again, thank you for everything that you've done, and particularly for development of that software. You're going to help a lot of people.
Thank you, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw the conversation to a close, I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode today, and a big thanks goes to Dr. Michael Chambers for sharing his insights and wisdom with us. I also want to thank Traction 5 and SaaS platform that makes this podcast possible. It's a platform for mentorship programs and innovators who are passionate in igniting change. So stay curious, stay motivated, and until we meet again in the next episode.